Fascism. You hear this word thrown around all the time, right? It's loaded with history, but most of the time it's just used as a political insult for, well, pretty much anyone you disagree with. But look, if everyone is a fascist, then nobody is. So let's cut through all that noise and figure out what is fascism really. You know, George Orwell absolutely nailed the problem here. He wrote that for most people, the word fascism has basically lost its meaning. It just signifies something bad, something undesirable. And that vagueness, that's exactly why it's so easy to misuse and, honestly, so hard to pin down. And hey, if you're feeling a little lost about it, you are in very good company. The famous historian Sir Ian Kershaw, a guy who spent his entire life studying this stuff, he said defining fascism is like trying to staple jelly to the wall. So yeah, it's messy. Okay, so here's our challenge. We're dealing with a word that's both everywhere and nowhere at the same time. But it's not meaningless, not at all. Our goal here is to get past the name-calling and build a real, solid, historical understanding of what this ideology actually is. And look, this really matters, because there's a huge danger in getting it wrong. If we just throw the label around at everything we don't like, we risk going numb to the real warning signs when they actually appear. And on the flip side, we might slap that label on things that just aren't fascist. To really get to the bottom of this, we've got to go back to its origin. And you might be surprised to find out it doesn't start with some dense political book. Nope. It starts with a very old, very physical object, a simple bundle of sticks. Okay, so the word fascism comes from the Latin word fosses. A fosses is literally a bundle of wooden rods or sticks, usually tied together, sometimes with an axe head sticking out of the middle. And the metaphor here is so simple. But man, is it powerful. Think about it. A single stick, you can snap it over your knee. Easy. But when you bundle a bunch of them together, they become incredibly strong, almost unbreakable. It's the perfect symbol for strength through unity. Okay, but wait a second. If this was Mussolini's big symbol, then why is it literally carved into the walls of the US House of Representatives? Well, it's because for centuries, this symbol wasn't seen as a bad thing at all. It was a pretty common icon for governments, including the early US, meant to represent collective power and justice. So how on earth did this ancient symbol of unity get twisted into one of the most toxic political movements in history? For that, we need to understand the world it was born into. This wasn't some idea cooked up in a quiet library. No, fascism was forged in the fire and chaos of the First World War. I mean, just picture Europe in 1919. The old empires, the Austro-Hungarian, the Ottoman, the Russian, they'd all just collapsed. It left this massive power vacuum. People were desperate for new ideas, new systems, anything that promised to bring back order and national pride. And right into this mess steps Benito Mussolini. And his backstory? It's a trip. Before the war, he wasn't just a socialist. He was a high-ranking member of Italy's Socialist Party. But he got kicked out because he supported Italy joining World War I, thinking it could spark a revolution. By 1919, he'd grabbed that idea of national unity and mashed it together with revolutionary energy to create his own thing. And this right here is maybe the most important thing to get about early fascism. Unlike communism, which had Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto as its playbook, there was no fascist manifesto. It was an ideology of action. It was defined after the fact by the choices its leaders made once they grabbed power. They were kind of making it up as they went along. All right, now we're getting to the heart of it. Let's really decode what fascists actually believe. You can think of this next part as looking at the stat sheet for a political ideology. And bam, right out of the gate, you see this massive split on one simple idea: equality. Liberal democracies are built on the idea of equal opportunity. Communism, in theory, says equality is something we should work towards. Fascism, it just throws both of those ideas in the trash. It says flat out that people are not created equal, and it's weak and unnatural to even pretend they are. So at its absolute core, fascism is all about a natural hierarchy. It's basically social Darwinism for a whole country. The idea is that the fittest and the strongest are supposed to rise up and lead. And the weak, well, they're seen as a drag on the nation and they shouldn't be allowed to hold it back. So what's at the very top of this pyramid? The state, the nation itself. Under fascism, you, the individual, exist for one main reason: to serve the state. Your personal worth, your identity, your whole reason for being is defined by how you serve the national collective. The state is absolutely everything. And if the state is everything and hierarchy is the rule, then what's the perfect model for that? Well, the military, of course. For a fascist, the army isn't just a tool you use for war. It's the ideal version of society. It's aggressive, it's disciplined, it's totally hierarchical, and it's obsessed with power. It's what the whole nation should aspire to be. And what about money, the economy? It's not exactly free market capitalism, and it's definitely not socialism. The best way to describe it is probably crony capitalism. Sure, private businesses can exist, they can make profits, but only as long as they're serving the goals of the state. If they step out of line, well, control can be handed over to someone who's a little more loyal to the party. Okay, let's bring it all home. We've looked at all the different parts, so now we can put together a pretty straightforward checklist. Think of it as a field guide for recognizing these warning signs. So, when you put it all together, a really clear picture starts to form. You've got an economy, that crony capitalism, where it's not about what you know, but who you know. You've got a culture that worships the military. All the power gets concentrated into the hands of one charismatic strongman leader who gets the country's frustrated young people on his side. And to keep it all going, you need an enemy. You scapegoat a group for all the nation's problems, and you promise a return to so-called traditional values by rolling back social freedoms. So we started with a word that's usually just a lazy insult. But as we've seen, fascism is a very specific thing with a very real and very dark set of beliefs. Having a clear definition, that's the crucial first step. So the question that leaves us with isn't just about what fascism is. The real question is, how do we recognize these patterns to make sure that history's bundle of sticks doesn't get bundled up all over again?